convening the meeting now, and I think we've got about 10 minutes left for further questions, basically directly on the trip, directly on what me and James have said. So, does someone who's not asked a question yet have a question? Andy?
Yeah, you and James haven't mentioned about the other delegations. Could you just tell us about all of the other groups who were there and what continents they came from?
Right, good point. We were joined, I think, on our third day of the trip by a delegation, one Italian delegate called Marco from KFA Italy and the Milano Juche di Study Centre, and he was, he was part of the group we were with. There was an enormous Russian delegation there, headed by Dmitry Kostenko. He's quite a well-known Russian figure, Russian activist, and also me and Sean's old friend Vadim.
Mm-hmm. Who goes every year?
Yeah, and the
Vadim.
Vadim. What's the surname?
Don't know.
Is it something like
Andre?
No, Vadim Kuchma.
Something like
Yeah.
that. Something like that.
I mean, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but it's spelled Kuchma. But I mean, they had it was quite a sizable delegation they had, wasn't it, James?
Yeah, it's huge.
And then there was the Thai delegation led by our Sonjit and his son.
More food.
Thank
I
you.
got you these guys. These are on me.
Cheers. Thanks
you
very
very
much.
much.
Cheers.
Lovely.
So,
Is he into Juche secretly?
Yeah, he must be following.
yeah, help yourselves. You know, don't let it go to waste. So yeah, there was a Thai delegation there as well.
And Sonjit is a doctor of Juche.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Along with your good self, and you are the only British person who's ever achieved that distinction.
That's correct. But yeah, I mean, the delegations, it was a bit low key because it was the 74th anniversary rather than an anniversary ending in 0 or 5. So there weren't so many delegations. I mean, I think when we go next year and in 2022, it'll be quite different. It'll be quite a lot of people. So I think in 2018, I think it was well over 300 people just invited by CAS alone, and about the same number invited by the Cultural Relations Committee. Right, Theo.
Do you have any updates? Because I understand that this summer there were problems with crops, with flooding in Korea.
Well, I mean,
there was talk of aid being sent from abroad.
Well, I mean, I think what you're referring to was there was a sort of bad typhoon at the end of August and beginning of September, but we honestly couldn't see any sign of damage anywhere where we went. So it looked like any damage that had occurred because of the typhoon had been repaired. And, you know, as far as we could see, none of us are agricultural experts, but, you know, the crops looked in fairly good shape, and efforts were underway to harvest the crops, quite intense efforts, as James said, you know, quite a lot of people out in the fields actually working quite hard to get the harvest in. Some use of machinery, sort of few tractors, but basically the harvest looked underway. And when I asked about it, I was told that the harvest is not bad. That was the quote. Not bad. It was said to be not bad. But I say from what we saw, it looked fine. There was no obvious sign of crop failure. Right, someone who hasn't asked a question. Right, don't all.
I think that's it.
No one else. Jamal, do you?
Oh, no, Mr. Hudson.
Ah, right. Jonathan, anything you want
Covered
to?
most of the points.
Right, okay.
There's still no pollution like in London, in Pyongyang.
The air seems quite clear. The air is even clearer when you go to the mountains. They always tell me about the clear air in the mountains, where it is extremely pure because you have loads and loads of trees and less traffic than Pyongyang. In fact, it's a sort of propaganda myth, worn very thin now, but I mean, they always used to say, streets of Pyongyang are empty, you won't see any cars. Well, that's not true. You do actually see quite a lot of traffic in Pyongyang. Lots cars, taxis, lots of lorries and trucks. I think the trucks actually spoiled James's photography on more than one occasion.
Yeah,
when
a couple of
What's the
times,
difference
yeah.
between a lorry and a truck?
No.
A lorry is
Same thing.
anglicised for truck.
Technically, there is a difference. A lorry is a flatbed. A truck has sides.
In English, there's usually
But
two
unless you're
words
in
for
the
everything.
trade, they're interchangeable in English.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw quite a lot of traffic on the roads, but I mean, I was told that they're trying to develop different forms of transport, and you do have railways as well as the roads, and also water transport. They do use in some parts of DBRK rivers to transport goods as well. So it's they're trying to develop an integrated transport system, which I think in a lot of countries has always been a slogan or a desire, but never seems to have happened. Right,
I'm
Jamal.
interested in the health service. How is the health service funded? Is it, obviously there shouldn't be any private sector there.
There's no private sector in the health service. Health service is funded in the same way as all the other social and public services in the DBRK through the profits of state-owned industry. Theo and then Joe, and then we sort of close this part.
Could you say a bit more about the Songyang Wang University, which I assume doesn't exist anymore after the war? But you said it was founded in 992.
Yeah,
That's actually about 30-something years, 34 years older than Oxford University.
yeah. Basically, that's like a historic site on the sort of edge of Kaesong City. And you've got two distinct entities there. You've got the actual historical site, which you can go round, and then you actually they still also have the industry of University of Light Industry, which uses the same name, but is a modern university. But we went round the historic site, which is defined as a heritage site by the UN Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, UNESCO. And we went around back seeing different things. So it was quite interesting, and you can learn a lot about Korean culture there as well. Right, Joe.
A short follow-up question. Thanks for your explanation to my last question about that DPRK has a realistic sense of what the U.S. is and what can realistically be hoped for. But so I think your explanation answered my question roundly. But can you comment on? I saw footage within the last couple of years. I don't remember exactly when, during one of the summits where Trump's cabinet, people in Trump's cabinet were calling for whatever complete, irreversible, verifiable something or other, dismantling of the nuclear capabilities. And I saw footage of massive facility being filled in and destroyed, and how does that fit in with your explanation of the overall dynamic, and what was the significance of that?
Well, no facilities have been dismantled, none at all.
We saw footage of a massive facility being buried with dirt and cement.
Oh,
I think
what-
you might be referring to the nuclear testing ground.
Nuclear testing
Yeah.
ground, which has been disabled, which DPRK said they would suspend nuclear testing, but they haven't actually dismantled any nuclear weapons. They dismantled the test site, which in fact the year before they said they basically completed the nuclear weapons program. So they discontinued tests. I think that's what you're referring.
But that was a concession that was demanded by the U.S.
No, that was actually made before the talks. DPRK sort of announced a policy of engagement and said they would no longer have any nuclear tests and no longer any ICBM tests. However, recent statements from the DPRK have said that they may reconsider the steps they've taken. In other words, they may resume nuclear tests, and they may well resume ICBM tests. So, say that's what might happen. I mean, the US have, I think, used different terms: complete, irreversible, verifiable disarmament, and there's another one they put forward, and there was a lot of argument between the experts of whether this was really something different or whether this was the same thing under a different name. Right, so any more questions?
There was
Yeah, okay,
earlier
Jamal.
there was talk about the Libyan model to be applied to North Korea.
DPRK totally rejects the so-called Libyan model. They totally reject it. I mean, that was what John Bolton tried to put forward.
I mean, it's a good thing they are very conscious, the DPRK
Yeah.
side, because Libyan model is a fraud. It's led to the destruction of the Libyan state.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about the Libyan model is Libya didn't really have a fully fledged nuclear program. It actually gave up its nuclear program before it had really even begun. They, just gave it up and even handed the materials over to the US, which was, incredible capitulation. And apparently, John Bolton thought the DPRK should do the same. That they should dismantle all their nuclear facilities, all the missiles, all the nuclear weapons, and then shift it over to the US. He seemed to be also totally unaware that even if the DPRK did agree to such an incredibly rash step, that it'd actually probably take years for that to be done. But anyway, okay. Come on to some more ideological matters, and basically in September I attended the seminar of the European Regional Society for Study of the Juche idea, which was attended by a DPRK delegation and also a delegation of the International Institute for the Study of the Juche idea, and delegates from Austria, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Spain, Germany, Austria, Russia, Ukraine, France, Italy, and of course the UK. And we had very productive discussions there. Some very good speeches were made. And also recently the North European seminar on the Juche on the 25th anniversary of the publication of Socialism Is A Science took place. I've shared the links on Facebook. Basically, they've included contributors such as myself and Alejandro Caldebenos, and KFA Spain, KFA Italy in the seminar, and the contributions are up on the website, and I'd recommend everybody looks at it. And I'll just read out my own contribution, and if anyone has any questions, we can take them. And after that, we've moved towards closing the meeting. And say, yesterday, it was 25 years since the publication of the work Socialism As A Science by the great leader, Comrade Kim Jong-il. It can be said, without any hint of exaggeration or fear of contradiction, that this was the most important piece of writing on socialism published in the last part of the 20th century, and Comrade Kim Jong-il was the only leader of a socialist country and leader in the international communist movement to tackle the question of defending and expounding the scientific nature of socialism and its inevitability. I can remember first reading this work with great excitement when it was first published in 1994. At the time, socialism in a number of countries had been frustrated and many communist parties were in a poor state. The bourgeois imperialist mass media were trumpeting about the collapse of communism, end of socialism, and even the end of history. Many communists were sunk in disillusionment, and others turned to dogmatism or nostalgia politics. However, the great leader, Comrade Kim Jong-il, cut through the fog of confusion and disillusion by publishing Socialism As A Science and many other excellent works. Marx, Engels, and Lenin had turned socialism from a utopian dream into a science. However, towards the late 1980s and early 1990s, a series of abnormal events took place, namely the frustration of socialism in a number of countries owing to the conspiracy and intrigue of the modern revisionists, who were the agents of imperialism, within the socialist camp and the international communist movement. As the great leader Comrade Kim Jong-il wrote, the crumbling of socialism in various countries does not mean the failure of socialism as a science, but the bankruptcy of opportunism which has corrupted socialism. Although socialism is temporarily experiencing a heart-rending setback as opportunism, it will, without fail, be revived and win ultimate victory for its scientific accuracy and truth. End of quote. This was indeed a timely rebuff to the imperialists and reactionaries who, taken advantage of the abnormal developments, made extremely false and slanderous assertions that socialism failed and that socialism in some way was unscientific or infeasible. The work was an unparalleled inspiration to the world revolutionary people looking for an answer in the difficult international situation caused by the frustration of socialism in some countries. It was a real shot in the arm, a tonic for the international communist movement. Chairman Kim Jong-il smashed sophistries about class cooperation advocated by reformists and revisionists, explaining that the exploited class and their stooges put forward the theory of class cooperation and tried to block the struggle of the exploited working masses against exploitation and oppression. Within the communist movement, reformists and revisionists demanded class cooperation and seriously harmed the revolutionary movement. Today, traitors to socialism are also clamouring for a return to capitalism, harbouring illusions about capitalism and expecting aid and cooperation with the imperialists. History shows that to expect goodwill or class cooperation from the exploited class is to make a mess of the revolution. End of quote. This was a telling blow to the theories of collaborating with imperialism and giving up class struggle. In some capitalist countries, reformists and traitors advocated social partnership, compromise with the exploited class, but the teachings of Comrade Kim Jong-il in Socialism and the Science demonstrate that such ideas are fallacious. Comrade Kim Jong-il also refutes the idea that capitalism can be reformed, saying, the farce of reforms staged by the ruling bourgeoisie is essentially aimed at extricating themselves from the crisis of capitalism. Social transformation on progressive lines can only be carried out by the awakened and united popular masses, since everything in society is created by the masses. They must be naturally be masters of everything. Only in socialist society, where state power and the means of production belong to the people, can the masses be the real masters of everything in society. Since they are the masters of everything in society, the popular masses must occupy the position of masters. They must exercise their rights, fulfill their responsibility, and run as masters, enjoy a worthy and happy life as masters. As they are the masters of everything in society, they must hold the position of masters and exercise their rights as such. End of quote. All those who aspire for socialism and who are active in the labour movement should take to heart the teaching of the great leader Comrade Kim Jong-il and uphold them like a red torch. In the work Socialism and Science, the great leader Comrade Kim Jong-il showed that socialism is the banner of independence for the popular masses and the means for the popular masses, including the working class, to realise their independence, become masters of their own destiny. Thus, leader Kim Jong-il defined socialism in a fresh way, free from any dogmatic interpretations. Socialism as a science proved the accuracy and validity of the socialist idea. It fully demonstrated the scientific nature of socialism and the inevitability of its victory. At the time of its publication, it served as a beacon or lighthouse for the socialists and communists and progressives of the world, groping in the darkness caused by the frustration of socialism. Socialism is a Science was the second Communist Manifesto. It showed the true genius of Comrade Kim Jong-il as a great theorist and ideologist. There is no doubt that socialism as a science is as relevant and valid as it was 25 years ago. It charts the way ahead for the world socialist movement. The work of the great leader, Comrade Kim Jong-il, was carried forward by the dear respected leader, Marshal Kim Jong-un, who is leading the Korean people forward to the final victory under the banner of Juche and self-reliance. Thank you for listening. Right. Does anyone have any questions on that speech I've just made?
Just to say, it was one of the most profound works of the latter part of the 21st century, of the 20th century rather, and the 21st century. That it dealt with questions of building a socialist and communist society, which were dealt with by the previous leaders of socialism, and did re-establish confidence and faith in the socialist idea, which had taken a great knocking due to the counter-revolutions in the Soviet Union and East European countries. And I actually made a speech and wrote a paper on the 20th anniversary of the said work. And a question as well, indirectly related to the work. It's being muted that there's going to be a meeting of communist and workers' parties
Right.
in Pyongyang. Will this be focused on the Pyongyang Declaration, or are they there for the 75th anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea?
Well, partly the 75th anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea, but there is another reason for this. Andy or Theo, do you want to explain this about the
Communist Workers' Party in Pyongyang?
Oh, it's the, you see, I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the ruling parties all went onto the secretariat of the Solidnik, or rather the secretariat which runs the conference of Communist and Workers' Parties. Prior to that, that didn't happen. And so when the Workers' Party of Korea, the Communist Party of China, the Cubans and the Laotians went on to the Secretariat, in fact it was more or less inevitable that the task of organising a conference of this scale would end up in one of the ruling parties, and I've no doubt that Beijing will be the year after. You see, these conferences are hosting them. There's only a small number of parties which can do it. And initially, these conferences were founded in 1998, and for the first 10 years they always met in Athens. That task proved a bit too costly for the Greeks, not just in the finances, but because the Greek party is heavily involved in the class struggle in Greece. But the only parties who have been able to shoulder the burden have been the Portuguese, which is a very big party, the Belarusians and the Russian parties, the Indian parties, and the South African. And all of those parties are mass parties, and one or two of them are junior members of coalitions. And so the facilities to do that. Now, the Workers' Party of Korea has been a participant in these conferences from the very beginning, since 1998. And the Communist Party of China, for many years, only sent observers in the name of their National Social Science Committee, which in essence was the International Department of the Communist Party of China under a different name. But about 3 years ago, there was this change. And it seemed to me, I was saying, if you remember Dermot, I said 2 years ago, I thought it would have been last year in Pyongyang, but they'd already agreed, or the Secretariat agreed, that it would be a joint Greek and Turkish conference this year, which we weren't able to attend. So I think that this is why, and I think next year it will be in Beijing.
You mean the year after next?
Yes, the year after
2020,
next.
20,
You
no,
see,
sorry,
because,
2020.
yes, because Pyongyang has the facilities to host such a big conference, and obviously so does Beijing as well. And I'm sure that the ruling parties will play a greater role. I mean, as far as we're concerned, our party has always said that the only way that this series of conferences can be strengthened is with the proactive participation of ruling parties. Though there is some, I have to say, some parties are perhaps not too keen on this as well. It is a bit controversial because some parties fear that the bigger parties will dominate it. But that's not the view. That's not the view of the Secretariat. It's a practical thing, and I'm sure it will be a terrific conference. In many respects, you see, for us, we normally only go to the European ones, but in many respects, a conference in Pyongyang would be cheaper than a conference in South Africa or other places.
Yes.
So even though, as Dermot said, about 1,000, I suspect, though I'm only guessing, that the Koreans may even supply charter planes, as they used to do in the early 1990s.
Well, they still do. I think last year they had some charter flights going out, and certainly 2012. I mean, they were using. I mean, they were having hourly planes.
Yes. So I think that's a big thing. And the other thing is the Chinese,
for celebrations.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be very well attended. Kim Jong-un obviously will open it, as is the practice for the General Secretary of the host country.
Yeah.
You see, China too has been organising its own conferences as well.
Yeah. But to recap, I mean, this conference is like international conference of communist and workers' parties that was set up on the initiative of the KKE, and which in Britain the members of it are the New Communist Party and the Communist Party of Britain, led by Rob Griffiths. Those are the two members. CPG-BML was denied entry as a member to membership of this conference, and I think most countries there's usually one or two parties that are members of the conference, and I think in a few countries there, I think there is like 4 parties or 3 parties that are members. But yes, it is basically that grouping. So I mean this conference, it's not actually a DPRK initiative; it's an international one. But I think it'd be quite something, World Communist Conference held in Pyongyang, because many of us think that really they should have had a World Communist Conference in Pyongyang years ago, because there was that big meeting in April 1992, as Sean says, the Pyongyang Declaration came out of that meeting.
Was that a one-off event?
Basically was one-off,
And whose initiative was that?
In 92 was the Koreans. That was a DPRK initiative.
And why have they not had other things like that since?
No. I think because simply, there were a lot of different conferences of communist and workers' parties going on. All sorts of ones, they perhaps thought that these were adequate, and there was no need for them to sort of pitch in again, because the Belgian PTB used to organise these conferences, and then the KKE. So sometimes you might get as many as 3 or 4 international conferences a year. But this will be quite something. Right. Any other questions? Sean, did you want to say anything else on this subject?
I've just contributed.
Right. Okay.
To the meeting.
Right. Well, so we're doing fairly well for time. Not just say 1 or 2 other things directly about the situation on the Korean Peninsula, because there have been some very significant developments. First of all, there was the visit of respected Marshal Kim Jong-un to Mount Pakdu, which was very symbolic, and basically it symbolised his determination to continue along the road of self-reliance. And the day before, he'd said that the DPRK is going to smash the sanctions of the imperialists, and that pain is being turned into anger. Basically.
What does that mean?
Well, means what it says.
To smash the sanctions.
Yes, smash the sanctions of the imperialists using self-reliance. They will break the sanctions. They will become irrelevant. They will be cast into the dustbin of history. These sanctions will fail.
I think for any visitor to the DPRK, certainly for an objective visitor, whether that visitor has any sympathy towards socialism or not, you do not see any evidence on the ground of impact of sanctions on everyday life and activity. When I've been there, I haven't seen any impact of sanctions, and yet in other countries, when they implement sanctions, those countries fold over.
Well, I mean, basically, sort of DPRK has always been under US sanctions on and off, really, for more or less the entire period of its existence. Since 2017, you've had like massive UN sanctions packages, which are quite severe. And as Sean says, when we've been there in the last few years, you do not see any obvious effect. You can go to the shops and they're well stocked. You can buy different things. Trains and buses are still running in the DPRK. There's still electricity. I mean, I've seen some reports saying there's power cuts, but James, did we have a power cut when we were there? Not once. There's very little effect, and I don't want. I have to be perhaps a bit careful about how I say this, because some people don't like it when KFA speak their mind, and we get accused of being sectarian or leftist or attacking other countries. But it's nothing like the reports I've read about Venezuela. And DPRK, has an industrial base. It's able to make quite a lot of their own things. Give you an example: the Koro Hotel. Years ago, me and Sean can remember when they used to have the Hitachi lifts in them, the Japanese lifts. They've been replaced by Korean-made lifts. And when we were going round the Kim Jong-suk textile mill, the machinery there was all made in the DPRK.
I mean, right up to 2015, they were still using the Hitachi lifts in the Korea Hotel.
Yeah.
And then they were domestically produced ones.
Yeah, I think they went when they had that big refurb in 2017 of the hotel, which I remember someone complaining about. Said, "Oh, they got rid of the microbrewery on the ground floor," but don't,
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
I don't worry about that. But well, I mean, there's a great bar on the on the first and second floor.
Yeah, the third floor bar is good for networking.
Yeah.
But just to go back to the focus of the questioning, that was it. I believe in the brief period in the mid-1990s, the US relaxed the sanctions during the framework agreement, 1994, and might stand corrected or not. Did the DPRK have its own sanctions against the US?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think they used to have counter sanctions against the US, and there was on paper a relaxation of the sanctions against the DPRK, but they were never formally revoked. I think it was more or less a case they've scaled down. Because now you've got dozens of acts of the US Congress sanctioning the DPRK, which is quite severe. The other development I was going to just sort of speak about very quickly is DPRK has also taken the decision to, which again certain courts are whinging and whining about and saying, "Ooh, they shouldn't be doing this. Ooh, how terrible." They take the decision to demolish the South Korean buildings on Mount Kumgang, which actually did look pretty poor and grotty, and didn't look like very good hotel accommodation. Some of them did look like sort of great big huts, and it's now going to be built in a Korean style and socialist way with DPRK resources, and I think that's a very great step, and I think that's a step that we in KFA should be supporting, and this meeting should be supporting. But anyway, I've basically finished there. I hope it's been a good meeting for people. I hope they've enjoyed it. Hope you will all tell your friends and contacts, try and get bigger numbers of people to come to these meetings in future. And the only thing I believe Theo, Russell, Andy Brooks wanted to say something very quickly about an event they'd like people to attend.
We've got there's a couple of events coming up. One is on Saturday, 23rd of November, we're having one of our Ukraine protests in Whitehall, which is going to be in solidarity with Democrats, anti-fascists, trade unionists, socialists, communists, and communities in Ukraine have been targeted, including Roma and Jewish people, and the Ukrainians in exile. And that's in Whitehall, Saturday the 23rd. We've got a seminar coming up about a history seminar about a Jamaican communist on Sunday the 17th of November. And the only other thing is that a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party of Britain, Marxist-Leninist, has published a book on the history of black people in Britain since Roman times. And he was on the BBC World Service History Hour talking about his book for almost an hour. He's called Hakim Adi. If you just Google Hakim Adi BBC History Hour, you can listen to that online. And it's quite unusual to hear it's very, very good, a Marxist-Leninist view on black British history.
Right.
If anyone wants more information about those things, can you give me your email addresses?
Right. Well, there'll be a big chance to speak quickly after the meeting. So, Jose.
Just want to ask, can you name it again? The name of that?